Yeah, mine's going to be a bit less organized than Pedro and Tarbis. So like, I guess it's more like showing like following example, like just showing it off. But yeah, like just gonna basically just walk you all through making an exterior design cell from start to finish. Yeah, it's like basically just for the sake of scope, I've marked out a single cell here. Got like a few features that like you can come across, like working at least of an existing height map. Just as you can see, this is an existing height map. Some shape to the terrain. If you completely start from scratch, it's all flat. But yeah, when doing stuff like this for usually for bigger projects or if you like organize a project of my own, it's just kind of like a side thing of my own that I'm working on right here. It's like it uses assets from like a couple Beyond Skyrim projects that I'm on. But anyway, yeah, like as you can see, there's a river here. This is vertex paint that I use to mark where a road goes. Was little vertex paint to mark besides the cell. I gotta say, like normally you wouldn't really do a single cell at a time. Tend to like make smaller areas. Usually that make like naturally sense. So if there were like cliffs over here, then those would form the border. Then you would of course place the cliffs first. But we'll get to that in a bit. Uh, but yeah, like just for the sake of scope, we'll be doing single cell so we can like get it to finish within an hour, hopefully. Not all I have to make haste a bit. Uh, so yeah, I'm just gonna go jump straight in. Uh, to begin with this, what we want to do is we want to do some basic terraforming. Let me just disable editing colors. Colors. Got it. Max opacity down, and 8 is a better size for this. The maximum is 15, by the way. Like if you want to have things really big, 15 is the max. Special edition like it doesn't let you go higher. Oh, for text specs, by the way, so to say, I'm running Creation Kit through Mod Organizer, and I have Creation Kit fixes installed. It's the special edition one. So if you see certain things that you're like, hey, I don't think my Creation Kit has that, it's probably because, well, because of Creation Kit fixes. Mod Organizer doesn't really add anything to it. But yeah. So if anything like you see and you're like, huh, doesn't seem familiar, then that is probably why. If you don't have special edition Creation Kit and Creation Kit fixes. But yes, what we'll begin with is by deciding to do with the path. The easiest is to like definitely make it go a bit like this, more flat. And stuff like this is fine with like small slopes on the path, but you generally don't really want it to be on a slope like that. Doesn't really look good, can be annoying to navigate. So generally you want to do like this. But this will also go out of the cell because, well, yeah, like as I said, there's certain things that you kind of need to do on a grander scale than just one cell. So for like the sake of consistency, we'll kind of be doing this. And then just keeping some height difference in it because it does help break up an AToMM. So I would definitely recommend that. Uh, so, so what we now have is, and this is kind of, I don't like that. Next up is we want to do something else with the cell. And it's probably gonna put a little shack there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise up a bit of space for it. It's probably gonna be a little lower than the road. So kind of be doing this. By using this instead of the flatten tool, you can make terrain that's somewhat flat without it being completely flat. Because you generally don't really want completely flat terrain as it just doesn't look good. I'll also explain what this is in a bit, by the way. And then we'll flatten the coast of the river a bit. So basically just like, this is kind of outside of the cell, but kind of just belongs with the greater picture. So just make it a bit flatter using the soften tool to, soften it a bit. This is going to eventually have a cliff and then we'll properly terraform around it. So what we now have is like a rough terraforming of the thing. We'll take the smoothing tool again and smoothen out the road a bit. Kind of like, should disable seeing stuff like that, but I will. So we're just smoothing this out, and now we have a comparatively smooth path. All right. Then we're gonna go immediately to the next step. Now that terraforming is roughly done, like we will get back to it to a degree. Like the landscaping tool will be opened again, only for textures. But this is like a first step. Generally, when doing exteriors, at least I tend to move all over the place, like occasionally going back to certain steps because you've forgotten something or something else. Yeah. Gonna be doing is adding some cliffs. In case I want a bit of a cliff over here where the shack is going to be on. It's gonna feature though. This one works nice here, and this one works pretty well. Just gotta shove it into the ground a little bit, like that. If you do this, then it can also just little bit less wasted polygons by having a lot of stuff in the ground. Um, and then there's also probably gonna use one of these. I always like using these. Basically, we're just kind of just filling this all up. We're gonna do one over here too. Like the first one that's actually in the cell, and then like one over here. It's generally a bunch of. Probably also explain. I do have an opal here. I've already pre-made one for the stream because making opals is something that's a bit of a different category. Like you can dedicate an entire lecture to opals. I have to say it has basically rocks in it. It has uh, all sorts of plants in it. It's basically just rocks and plants actually. And then the plants are divided into different categories. You can rename stuff in opals. So divided into undergrowth, upper growth, and underclutter and harvestables. Upper growth and underclutter. Undergrowth is a actual word. Underclutter and undergrowth are made up. Fits the scheme. But I just like to like thought it a bit like that. Anyway, now that we've got some of this, we're gonna also have some short cliffs. What are those add? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna to mark this. This here is going to be a bit of a smoother section where the player can walk up. So we're gonna leave that empty. So we're just gonna do this. Gonna move this one back a bit so it doesn't overlap too much. And over here, this has a lot of exposed rock, more than would make sense. So I'm going to put this one on. This is a mirrored version of the vanilla dirt cliff. In case the form seems highly off to you, because it sure does to me. It's still nice for some variation. Anyway, that I'm going to do that. Then I'm gonna go at a cliff like this over here. These cliffs are custom, by the way, in case you feel like they look like they're based on vanilla shapes, but they're slightly different. So I'm gonna have to look at the chat through my phone because I can't really do it on my laptop because it's a laptop I don't really have a second screen to look it on, so. Yeah. So I'm just gonna quickly read back through the chat. My volunteering for an Opal guide. I gotta be honest, I was actually under the impression that we already had one. But if we don't, then I could probably do one at some point, maybe. Because they are very good to have. Like, that is kind of why I did this, because I thought someone else already did Opals. In that case, I can definitely
Make
do
a
one.
written guide if need be.
Could be good, yeah. I'm going to think. I think Opals maybe. Yeah, they can probably be explained in shorter than an hour, so written guide would probably be better. Just gotta find time and motivation for it. It's always the challenge. Yeah, I can do the quick run through of object palettes. It's basically you can open it by pressing World Object Palette Editing. I'm gonna quickly save this. You'll usually end up seeing this, and then you add stuff simply by dragging it into it, and then you actually place it not by the usual dragging it into the world, but rather by holding Control and Alt and then pressing. And then you can quickly spam assets. Not really what it's meant to be used for, but that's one of the functionalities of it. And Strength and Object Palette is basically a grouping tool for assets, like, yeah, just for a palette of assets that you want to use in an area. Work for interiors, exteriors, anything you want. But it's also more than that. If I, oh, let me load up one again. You can see the rocks here. I can definitely show it with this tree here, the aspen green over here. As you can see, usually the values are all zeros. Set to 0 except skill, it's set to 1. However, in this specific case, I've got this set to 180 and this to 0.2. So what this means that for every time I place a tree, it'll pick a random rotation between 0 and 180 in either direction, either in the plus or the minus. And it'll also pick a random scale between 1 and 1.2 or 0.8. It deviates 0.2 either side from 1. So as you can see, all these trees that I've literally just placed them with a single click, but they're all in a different rotation at a slightly different scale. So it's a very good way to make the fact that it's the same asset not that obvious. And then there's also a conform to slope option, which does exactly what it says. Conforms to whatever slope you place it on. Basically, those are some of the main features of object palettes. And then you can also do this, select a bunch, and it'll randomly pop out one of them. And by duplicating this, you can have a single object in there more than once. They'll have a slightly higher chance of placing this object. Those are all like some of the good uses of object palettes. Just a quick run through, in case you haven't heard of them. So yeah, that's the strength of them. They're very useful. Like, especially if you want to do it in exteriors, you don't want to not use them. Like, you will suffer. But for interiors as well, just the fact that it's a grouping tool is already just really useful. Just for that alone. Anyway, I'm gonna continue a bit on with the basic landscaping. You can see there's a little bit of a slightly steeper thing over here, which I'm also going to be adding some dirt clips to. Where's the dirt clips? Here they are. This one's pretty big, but I can add one of those. These are fun. Like, you don't want to use these too often. It's a bit of a unique model, but they're really cool, so I do like using them. Give a very interesting way to get up from one level to the other in the form of this. Like one height to the other, I mean, with that. Yeah. So Oh, and it's gone again instantly. Nice. Yeah, it's basically what you use them for. Just this fun. Uh, anyway, I wanted to add something here, so I'm probably gonna go and add div 03. This is one that you kind of need to watch out with a bit because it's very straight. So you do gotta, guess, put it in a way that the fact that it is that straight and kind of blocky even isn't that noticeable. See, it's like whoop, whoop, whoop. So just kind of hide it a bit like this. Be doable, should be fine. I did also mention wanting to have a shack here. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna put down the basic skeleton of a shack. For that, I'm gonna enable the snapping tools because the shack kit is, well, a kit. It snaps together, and I'm gonna once again pull out the terrain tool and use it to get the terrain to an somewhat flat-ish, at least flat enough level, where it's not like completely unnaturally flat, but it definitely is flat enough. Just smoothing it out a bit. I really like using the smoothing tool. It just really gets rid of like those. See if you can see them here, like stuff like these. These aren't the worst, but basically what pieces where you can see that the rain is built out of triangles. Just sometimes gets really obvious and it's not great. So just try to usually smoothen it out a bit to get that to fixed. You may also notice that the terrain over here, the land is different. I'll fix that in a bit. Like these right now are, yeah, all weird different textures. There's no proper retexture for those made yet. So. Anyway, gonna start with the frame. This is gonna be interesting because this is a kit I don't actually use myself that often. Because it's kind of a pain. It's a very interesting kit. This one, if you want to build a hut like this, it's not that difficult. Also, in case you're wondering why the asset was just popping right there, that's a feature of CK Fixes, the alt scroll. It's a very useful feature. Just do make sure to not control or attempt to control Z and alt scroll action because it will crash your creation kit. It's the only risk about it. Anyway, we're going to make it a bit longer by adding this. I'm gonna make like a fairly long shack. And then I'm gonna see by alt scrolling if I can find an opposite section for this. Is this correct? No, this overlaps. What? This is the correct one. Is this the correct one? Yes. Okay. So after a bit of puzzling using the skit, we now have this. And then I'm gonna scroll down a bit and eventually it'll give me some roofs. You can see, yes, here's a roof. I'm going to copy, Control D to duplicate, rotate around. I'll scroll a bit to find a different variant that so it doesn't look too repetitive. Control click to select them both. Move them around a bit, and then you can alt scroll both to switch around both of these. This one's fine like that. This one I kind of want to use a fix. Actually, for this one I also want to have this section appear like it's actually kind of dry. Like, semi-livable. And I'm gonna alt scroll over here too until we get to the walls. Just gonna add a wall like that. Add a wall like that. Select both, duplicate them, turn them around, and they instantly fit. This one I'm gonna scroll until I get a door. This one I'm gonna turn, and I'm gonna scroll back up to get this wall. This one I'm gonna turn. I'm probably gonna use the craft for. And then one more final duplicate and up. There should at some point be a wall. I think I missed it. Oh, here they are. Oh, I probably should have used these pieces, to be honest. Let me correct that. I kind of forgot that these pieces were a thing. Here they are. So. I'm just going to be doing that. For this one, there is also a variant without a wall between there. So for this one, I'm probably just going to be using that. Because I do actually like the idea of a cross like that. So now we've got our little shack. It's going to be around here. Going to be a little point of interest. It's going to be over here. It's just going to keep a bit of a dirt floor. But we'll eventually change the dirt texture as well, by the way. Just for now, we're just working with the default texture. That's how it's looks like when you don't have anything else applied yet. Now I'm gonna go back to these. I'm gonna grab this one, and I'm going to. Is this a nice place for it? Yeah, it's ever slightly tilted. You can't tilt this too obviously because there are roots that are hanging down. So I tilt it too much, and that becomes quite obvious. So don't do that. It doesn't look good. And we're gonna do that. Why is there a 01 variant? Whatever. Just gonna put one of these in. And we're gonna do that. Doesn't actually work that well. Hold on. I'm gonna make it an island instead. These are nice because they have like on all sides. Dirt cliffs are pretty much a universal piece. There's very few biomes where they don't work. Great. Sometimes a bit too great. They're very easy to overuse. So I'm gonna go here. This is gonna be a bit of a smoother area as well. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to be working with some basic land texturing. For that, I will start by setting this to 100, taking this dirt 01. So this is a vanilla texture, and I'm going to be using that as the base for this area. It's kind of a palette that I've come up with myself. It's a weird mix of vanilla and Cyrodiil textures, beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil. I'm just going to be using that for demonstration purposes. Also, I've just set the opacity to 100. You do not want to do that for anything else but this purpose. Just mask paint a basic texture, because painting multiple textures using a opacity of 100 just doesn't look good. It becomes very clear that yeah, just like textures that just suddenly end and then stop again. It's usually you want to like use 20 at max, preferably 10. For paths, I do tend to use 20, which I'm instantly going to be doing right now, by the way. I'm going to be mostly doing that because I want paths to be obvious. I've mentioned this as a road. I'm actually kind of treating it as a dirt path also. Like I'm not really doing a stone road that Skyrim has. Because those are actually quite a lot of work to do. So that's kind of taking a bit more time. A bit too much more time than we have. So I'm just gonna smooth out sections a bit using a using dirt 01 with a opacity of 10. Then I'm gonna edit colors and I'm gonna remove this over here so we can see the result. As you can see, it's sometimes pretty obvious how much it tiles. So what we're going to do is we're going to like very softly do this over it to occasionally break it up while still making the path clear and followable. Because a path is not just like something that there for immersion, it's also there to guide the player. So like always keep that in mind. And paths also have a gameplay function. So you do want to make them like clear to follow. Otherwise it can be pretty annoying for the player if they just try to follow a path but then lose it constantly because it's not clear. Is where it goes. Of course, paths can be made in various ways, like in a way, something like this, for example, is also kind of a path because the player notices it is and sees it as a way to get up. So if you do have an area where an actual path doesn't make sense, but you do want a tool to guide the player, something like this could be nice. Other tools are basically just having relatively dense vegetation with sections that you can walk through. Just kind of like, yeah, give a path like that without using an actual path texture, but just having it visibly seen like a path. I'm gonna quickly go smoothen all of this out a bit. What I'm then going to do is I'm gonna start applying some of these textures roughly where I want them. This is gonna be a bit of a foresty area. Especially this is going to be fairly forested. So I'm gonna be using the vanilla pine forest texture for that. It's actually going to be a deciduous forest. I'm gonna use a few deciduous trees for that. But there's not really a better forest texture for deciduous forest. I'm gonna use this for now. You have to say like this is a bit. This phase is kind of like around the same time as well. Basically, this is not just phase where you completely finalize all the ground textures. You can easily come back at a later stage and edit them if you need to. For now, I'm just gonna like do this a bit. This is gonna be a bit more field-like. So I'm using Cyrodiil meadow grass. Applying a bit over here to make it blend with the dirt cliffs over here. This is specifically a no-grass version, by the way, which is very much on purpose. The reason being that each cell is divided into quarters. You can see if you aim at a cell and press I while having the landscape setting open, you get this overview. From this overview, you can also edit some things about these. For example, you can replace. Then you get a list of all available textures, and you can replace one texture entirely with another within a quad. What you can also just do is aim at it and just delete or press the delete button, and you just remove the texture, and it gets replaced with whatever the dominant texture is. The dominant texture is what you see up top here. And basically what this boils down to with the no grass version is if the dominant version is a texture that has grass on it, then grass will become very difficult to remove. Basically, it'll be very persistent wherever it is. So, say if I do this, I now have some grass on my path. I don't want that. So I apply a bit of path texture here. You can see applying, but the grass isn't going away. This grass can be annoying like that. If your dominant texture is a grass texture, or a texture with grass objects, like this one, it's going to be even more annoying to get rid of it. Like, sometimes outright impossible. So, that's why you want your dominant texture to be a non-grass version. Right now it's dirt. I think that's fine. Maybe eventually the no-grass version will take over. We'll see. No grass. For now it is this. I actually forgot to add in a rock texture to, it's not too great. Let me go to land textures and limestone gravel. Is what I want? Possibly. Yeah, I think this one goes well with the rocks. So basically, you want to do this to kind of blend in the rock with the terrain a bit better. There's various kind of rock textures. Vanilla uses I think just L rocks one. It's a very basic name, but it uses that basically. I'm just gonna do it around here. Here you can see the land texture limit in action. So as you can see, there's 6 over here. Each of these have 6. That's the max. In Legendary Edition, if you go over it, the new texture will appear black. In Special Edition, it just doesn't let you. So what you need to do is delete. However, if it's the dominant texture, as is the case here, you've got to replace it. So in this case, I'm just going to go meadow, grass, no flowers. Replace this, and this one I'm going to dirt 01. It looks a bit silly like that. I should have replaced both with dirt 01, but just imagine this is going to be a field. So, as you may also notice, as I mentioned, the 6 texture limit. Uh, these are more textures than there are in the 6 texture limit. So, gonna have to choose. Like this can be more forested, while this is gonna have some more grass. Let me have a look where we're at, for example. Yeah, everywhere has about 5 right now, so we have room for like one more everywhere. For this one, I'm just gonna add some regular grass in. I'm just gonna like very subtly spray it around a bit. I think one of the most important rules is it doesn't actually matter if some of your ground is exposed. Because vanilla does it all the time, and it's not actually as noticeable as you might think it is. And it really helps with like the grass density, which is well good for performance, and it can actually help like visually declutter areas. So definitely do recommend doing that. In this case, you can see like it's fairly dense. Actually gonna apply this strongly to like create a few gaps in there. It also helps making it look less monotone, which is always good. Then I'm gonna over here apply a few of these flowers to kind of spruce up the grass over here. You can see what I'm trying to do it here. There's no space left. All the textures are already used in that quad. Can have a look. Here you can see an overview of everything that's used. Just gonna do this around this shack. Gonna go do this. Here we have a few more flowers around. You can also see there's a hole over there. Gonna quickly. Either way, this is kind of like the ground textures phase. I've kind of went a bit overboard. It doesn't need to have been as detailed as it was, but kind of did it anyway. Now we're quickly going to get over to the next phase, which is going to be adding some trees. Uh, trees and undergrowth is always a bit of an interesting one because you kind of want to do both at the same time, but also like, well, you kind of basically there's reasons to do one first and there's reasons to do the other first. Trees make more sense to do first because undergrowth tends to be formed around trees. Here you can also see the opal in working by the way. Just click 3 times and 3 different trees popped up. Uh, anyway though, like trees do make more sense, so I'm gonna use that. It's just a bit annoying because you do have to work around them when placing undergrowth later. But as you can see, I'm gonna place the highest density of trees around these patches here, these more foresty patches. In general, when placing trees, you will want to place them in patches. Oh, what, 2 times the same one? Don't want that. trees don't really grow perfectly spaced from each other. So we want to try and place them in clusters. And from what I've learned, uh, placing them in clusters of uneven numbers, so either on their own or in three or in five, usually tends to make them feel a little more natural for whatever reason. It's pretty interesting. So that's what I usually try to do. I always don't try to always hold to it, but I do generally try to. Having a lot of struggle trying to find a good one. Looking for a bit of a smaller maple. Yes, I'm kind of spacing it like that. This is like the selection of trees that I made. Oh, yeah, let me just put a palm tree there. This makes sense. Kind of just like all around the deciduous forest. Special Edition does have an annoying bug where trees have hitboxes, or like if you try to select them in the creation kit, their hitboxes are way bigger than they should be. It's really annoying, but we do have to work around on that. The rest of the advantage of the creation kit do outweigh them. Then we do this. And then grass on top of the rocks. Yeah, sadly no. Would be great, but for now this is the best way we have to blend them. And for these, yeah, like I usually try to add undergrowth on there. Tends to help. So, couple trees like that. Don't really like this model. The bend always feels very unnatural to me. Still pretty great, that model though. Happy we have them. In this case, I am going to sin a bit and add a bunch of trees onto just this bad texture. By the way, it's quite exposed. Point where I'm like, why is it this exposed? I'm gonna add, like, raise the ground a bit to create more of this effect. And then I'm gonna lower it again to try and make it blend ever so slightly better. This doesn't look particularly great. I'm gonna do that. Oh, I just accidentally made a hole somewhere. Let me Control Z that. Some sharp edges that I'm trying to fix over there. Lower that a bit. Basically, just do a bunch of stuff to make it look a bit better. So, trying to have a look at the time as well. Going faster than I thought it would, so I'm gonna try and do it a bit quicker than usual. Hmm, this is kind of unfortunate, but oh well. I'm now gonna like add in this. It should already look a lot better now that I'm blending it. You can also see the cell borders because I do have cell borders on, so I can remove the vertex here. Um, Gonna quickly add some grass over here. A little bit of the pine forest texture actually. Well, for some diversity in what grows here in the plants. So now we have a forest over here. Gonna add a few more trees over there. Another tree over there. Probably gonna add a tree over here, there, and one over here. And a single one over there as part of a different cluster. And we're gonna add like one more cluster over here. Oak is being in the way. Oak over there. This one over here. there, another tree over there. This one's big. Shrinking that down a bit. Then another oak over here as part of that cluster. Here there's not going to be too many trees otherwise. But this is the stupid bend one. I hate that one. I'm going to remove that and use this one instead. And one more right next to the, yeah, just a big old oak right next to the house. Looks fun to me. Looks good in my eyes. See if I can get an aspen over here. Yeah. And then let me have a look. I think I may be able to add a bit more pine forest over here. Can I? Yeah. Can add a small patch of more foresty grass around these. Because I've added a few trees there, I feel like having some foresty grass around them would look better. Here, a bit of a better blend is also welcome. So can I raise that up a bit? Also just remove the vertex color while I'm at it. Just gonna do that right now, like need to be done eventually. Just makes things look much better. And then we're going for the next phase, which is undergrowth. Also got a whole. Oh, sorry, I think I did. Like if I show you how to do it. Yeah, I've been going a bit fast. It's actually really just as simple because I've got my opal set up well. It's just as simple as I've got like 3 kinds of trees: aspen, forest, oak, and maple. And whenever I click, it just pops randomly any of these assets. And because I've set them up like that, pops them in a random scale and location between these limits. So it's actually really easy. It just needs some slight manual adjusting. Like sometimes by holding Ctrl S, I can scale the object. By holding right click, I can rotate it a bit. So like I scale it down a bit to a more reasonable size if I think it's too big. And if I feel like it's the right kind of tree, but not the right species of tree, but not the right asset specifically, then I Ctrl scroll through it to get different variants of the tree. Because I have TK fixes for a special edition creation kit, which adds that feature. I hope that kind of explains what I've been doing. What must have been confusing. For the next section, I'm going to do undergrowth, which boils down to shrubs, basically. Specifically non-harvestable shrubs. Made a whole palette of those as well. So what I'm kind of going to do is just kind of add those in and around the trees. See some ferns that need... These ferns are not quite completely set up at the conclusion here. You can see... Can I give you a live demonstration of how I do it? I usually like make the scale between 1 and 0.2. And then for stuff like these, I make them conform to slope. But for not every plant, that makes sense. So 180.2. Of course, if you do have them on confirm to slope, you gotta watch out what kind of slope you set them to. Because this kind of slope just doesn't make sense in any situation. It's kind of like the main thing to watch out for. How do I have this one? This one also needs to be set up properly. This is just a patch of some vines. Fun little thing for underground. Anyway, you can see some ferns. It's just a whole collection of any kind of bush that looks kind of green. As you can see here, I've got a bit of an issue with tree being quite dominant. Okay, here it's fine, but like if I press here, I click right next to the tree, but it still blocks it. So what I can do here is by pressing Ctrl T, I can disable being able to select 3 objects. Unfortunately, that also goes for these plants here. So if you do this, you don't have that many options anymore for adjusting the ones you place. You can, however, still by holding Z and then specifically clicking the arrow, you can still use that. And by just using the right mouse button, you can still rotate them. So moving them along axes, like one specific axis, and rotating them is still an option. But otherwise, can't really like adjust them too much. So, like for example, I can no longer scale them. So I'd have to Control T again if I want to scale them down a bit, like I just did. However, it does work to not constantly have your assets be stuck on trees if you find that that's happening. I want a slightly bigger bush. This one works. The maple bushes that I have over here are just ever so slightly too big. This one works fine. Unfortunately, it's a bit. I need to set this one to also adjust the slope, by the way. This is green shrubber too. And then you slowly go around filling in the patch of land you've done. And then slowly but surely you're getting a forest like that. Hey, I thought I said you to. Just to, whatever. For these two, I usually tend to like, I kind of refer to as the rule of 3, where basically you just want to have them in clusters of uneven amounts for the most natural look. So kind of just like that. I'm just going to Control T again to quickly. Oh, did I successfully? Yeah, no, I have. So to successfully do that. Shove this one into the ground a bit. I'm going to add a few ones to the edge of the road. Kind of like make the forest creep in on the road a bit more. Like I'm literally just like Control Alt clicking right now. The opal basically handles the rest for me. It's really convenient. Like an absolute must if you work with exteriors. Gonna add a few plants over here. This one will have to be corrected some other time. Like I don't really have the time for that right now. It's also like a whole different discipline. It's using texture sets, which is useful to know, though it's also a bit of a risky power. It's very easy to go overboard using texture sets and just make too many of them. Retexture too much. That's what I found from first-hand experience as well. Like I've definitely gone overboard at some point. So yeah, just kind of filling in the edges of the road.
I can't wait
But
to see the before and after picture.
I forgot to make a after picture, before picture, but
Oh, I'll
she
make
will.
one.
Then it does work. This one's a bit more of a fieldy area anyway, so a bit more open. The grass can handle it from there. Oh, that's a hole, but actually no wait, it's inside. Uh, it's not a particularly rocky area, but this is one of the areas where we can definitely use a boulder. This one's too big. I don't want to use that. Medium-sized boulder. This one's pretty good size. Sometimes you just have to be cheeky like this. I will move this one a bit though. It is usually nice to try and make floor not clip too much. can usually clip it with each other without being too noticeable, but you do want to like still prevent it from clipping with other stuff. So this is the patch we have right now. See, it is maybe a bit too open around the road, so we can go ahead and I'm just going to quickly add in a few more trees. I want like one more over here. Just going to be a single one. Then I want another cluster over here. That works well. I'm going to look for a good third one. This is a very small boy. This one is very good for our purposes. How big is this one actually? Not bad. I thought it was looked very big. Anyway, there's a smaller one. Especially canopies, as you can see, clip a lot, but completely fine for trees. The only risk there is that if you do it too much, then it still has the polys of a full tree, so do keep that in mind for optimization. You do, however, want to not have the branches and the leaves and the stem of another. You don't want to have those clip up too obviously, basically. I'm gonna add a small cluster of one of those. I accidentally hit them and then they start to look weird. Gonna go and hide those. And then we're going for a very quick run on what is actually already the last phase, pretty much. That's harvestables. Could have made a very small palette, luckily. It's Monk's Hood and Motherworth is gonna be like actual plants, which I'm gonna put on a few places. I don't think I've really set these up to rotate properly yet, so gonna have to make do. Bit of Motherworth over there. This field over here is gonna be getting a bit, few of them in between. I want to quickly add a little bit of grass over here. I'm gonna use the no flowers variant because it feels like a very empty space otherwise. And then I'm gonna add, got two mushrooms over here, which I'm going to be adding in a few select shadowy spots. Basically just where it would make sense for mushrooms to grow. There, gonna add one among the forest trees over here because it's fairly shadowy. This seems like a pretty decent spot for one. And over here. And probably one right next to the shack. Then this would normally be like the very, very last phase, which is FX. This is very specific and usually dependent on the biome. In this case, I'm gonna be, let me have a look. Not a room bound, where's a trigger box? FX. Should be, if I'm not mistaken, it should be a, huh. Is this the right? I gotta say, this is something that I don't really have that much experience with myself. So that may be the reason why it's not really working that well. Basically, through an FX, you can add it so that if you walk through it, wait, I know, FX camera attached, that's the one that I needed. And basically, I'm gonna like make a box that encompasses. In this case, I'm just gonna do the entire area. It's gonna be pretty high as well. I want to make sure that like, wherever you go, you're under influence by it. I press 2 to hide that the gizmo again. And then I'm gonna go and say script, camera attached script properties. This is blowing fog. Thatch leaves maples. This is specifically a Cyrodiil variant, but you can basically use this to decide the kind of maple. I think there's a pine tree variant for vanilla, but like it just adds just a little bit extra. Then I'm gonna hide it again and do one final thing, which is location setup. I'm gonna be searching through the statics for a map marker. I'm gonna drag that in. You can see it has a bit of a circle around it. This is, well, to mark a location on your map. So what I can do now then is marker data, edit name. I'm just gonna name it Forest Shack for now. Type shack. And then in the extra I can edit the radius, aka this yellow circle. That is determined how close you have to get for you to discover the location. In this case I'm gonna make it 700. Seeing the time is getting very low, by the way, so then I'm going to quickly add a COC marker. It can be used to quickly go to this cell. And then I'm going to do this, linked route. And with that, this is now linked, which means this is now a point where both if you COC to this cell and if you travel to this map marker, you will be dropped at this point facing that direction. And with that, we basically have a unhide that. You can use M to hide or unhide markers, by the way. We have a finished exterior cell. You kind
Wow,
of want to.
going from that, going from where you started to this in just an hour is pretty crazy.
Honestly, I was like, yo, can I actually do this in an hour halfway through? I was like, oh shit, this is taking longer than I expected. But at the same time, yeah, it does tend to take long, level design. I kind of wanted to ask. I don't know how much Hannes has to do. I was initially planning on quickly checking out in game. We don't really have time for that anymore, though. But
If you'd like to. Can you hear me? Test, test.
yes, I can hear you. And I
Okay.
gotta know if you still have stuff to prepare. How much time you think you need?
If you want to go into the game and test it 5 minutes, it's fine for me.
I'll gladly quickly do that then, so we can like have a look around. I'm gonna quickly have a look and memorize what the cell was actually named again. Kinda tends to help. The AU stream cell makes sense. It's gonna take a little bit for my special edition to start up anyway, so. In the meantime, are there any questions? I see. Can you change the dirt textures on the mushroom patches? You absolutely can. There is, however, one thing. Normally you would use texture sets for stuff like dirt cliffs and those like actual rock cliffs. You would just do texture sets. However, you can also do that for these patches, but how these things work, that they're basically two models in one. One regular one and then the harvested one. And the problem is that if you use a texture set, you will only change it for the non-harvested one. So as soon as you harvested it'll use its original texture. So you usually have to texture these ones by adding a new NIF and changing the texture in NIF scope. At least that's my experience with them. So it's a little more complicated than that. So I usually tend to like feel like you don't really need them too often in a biome. Tend to just really sneakily sink them around until you can't see the ground mesh anymore. Oh, never mind. Hopefully it'll actually do it soon because I'm gonna do this quick so Hannes can get going. UGM. I always set up God mode. COC, AST, AU, test cell. Excuse me? This is what I named it, right? Stream cell, never mind. Always make sure you use like sensible names for your stuff. That way you can actually remember it. One thing I love about Skyrim especially is you can actually alt-tab. As you can see, we are now dropped into this area. If you look closely, I hope my stream resolution is good enough for it, but you can occasionally see green leaves falling around. That's the effect of the what the trigger box does. And as you can see, like here is the forest. Trees everywhere. You can see the white cap here. There's definitely a lot of clipping going on, so it would need some fixing, of course. And of course, that's the one downside of using only a cell. Like you can see way further down a single cell, so it ends up pretty abruptly. Okay, you would go here, and then as soon as you come within the radius we set, we discover forest check, and we can walk in. Nothing there. Didn't have time for that. Some other worth. Going around on the river. Here we can see it on the map. Forest check, and if we fast travel to it, we will now be dropped in this space again because we connected up with the QC marker. Like over here. Just look around a bit, and this is the result of our stream. Then I'm gonna quickly quit out of that and end my stream and let Hannes take over. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time to check it out today.